So, I hope you all had a chance to read this week's Torah portion. It's Tzav, Leviticus 6:1 through 8:36. Now, the first thing I have to say about Tzav is we have to get on the same page with this because in different translations, it starts in different verses. All right, my translation, I use the TLV, it starts on 6:1, but if you have a KJV or some of the other ones, it's going to be in 6:8. So, in either case, Zav is the first word of the second verse of the Torah portion. So I'll read 6:2 or 6:9 if you have that version. It says, "Command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the Torah of the burnt offering." So Zav is command, right? And it means to appoint or to charge someone with a task, all right? And that's what this entire parsha is about. It's a list of commands that outline the task of the sacrifice and of the service for the Mishkan, and then later the Beit HaMikdash, or the tabernacle and the temple. Now, if you think I'm behind a parsha, because this sounds a lot like what Joshua's parsha was about last week, you're almost correct, because the two are very similar. They go over the sacrifices, and that's exactly what this one is about. Here's another admin point that I want to bring up, and it's that when you're reading Vayikra or Leviticus, right, a lot of the things that are covered in Leviticus are not chronologically flowing behind Exodus, right? By that, I mean a lot of it was given during the time that the Exodus story is going on, and most of it was on Mount Sinai. You see a little bit of a difference in that, for example, in chapter 8 of Leviticus, which is in this parsha, it mirrors completely with Exodus 29, which is the command about the ordination sacrifice. God gives that to them on Mount Sinai, and then in chapter 8, they are doing it. So it goes from a future tense to a present tense. And there are some instances like that throughout the entire book of Leviticus, and you'll just see that as you start reading it. So just note that most of it was given on Mount Sinai, and then we're reiterating and we're pulling it out here and we're talking about it. So what I really want to talk to you about is the different types of the sacrificial offerings, and then I'm going to key in on one. All right, so a good verse to sort of encapsulate all the sacrificial offerings is 737. They're all given, and then he's going to sort of go over and say everything they did. So I'll just read that for you. Leviticus 7:37. This is the Torah of the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, the trespass offering, the ordination offering, and the sacrifice of fellowship offerings. So there were 6 listed there, and whenever, I'll get to that when I get to that. Sorry. I'm just collecting my thoughts. All right. One thing is you have to realize is in your translations, it may say the peace offering or the well-being offering instead of the fellowship offering. So just know if I'm saying fellowship offering, I'm talking about what's called the peace offering in your version. All right. Now, when I was reading about these sacrifices, another verse came to mind, something from the New Testament, from what Rav Shaul or Paul says in Romans 12:1. I'll read that to you. It says, "I urge you, therefore, my brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable spiritual service." So the question that I sort of devised from reading that in light of this parsha is, if I was to consider my body a living sacrifice, something given and presented to God, like Paul says, which sacrifice would the purpose of my body most resemble compared to these sacrifices? All right, so I'm only going to go over 5 of them, right? I'm going to just, from the beginning, I want to exclude the ordination sacrifice because that one is very specific. It's not a personal sacrifice that a person brings. It's a communal ceremony to ordain the priest and the temple. All right. So here's why I'm asking this. It's because I think Paul, when he says this, he had a sacrifice in mind. All right. I don't think that, well, let me just say this. Have you ever heard you can take the rabbi out of the temple but you can't take the temple out of the rabbi. I don't know if you ever, I think I may have made that up. You've heard it? Okay, all right, good. Because that thought came to my mind in light of Paul saying this, knowing what he knows, having this as lifelong goal and focus of his learning. He's not going to use the word sacrifice flippantly. Whenever he says the word sacrifice, he's thinking of a particular sacrifice with a particular purpose and function. So, for him to compare a person to a sacrifice, he had one in mind. And whenever he says a living sacrifice, clearly he's making a distinction here that it's not a literal sacrifice. This is figurative and to be applied in the purpose and the function of the sacrifice. He's not saying go to the altar and spill your blood on it. It's not what he wants. It's not what he's asking. Before we go through these sacrifices, I want to take a small poll. Which one would you guess that I think Paul is referencing here that we should be a sacrifice like? All right, just do a show of hands. This means absolutely nothing. I'm not taking a record of who votes for what. All right, who thinks we should be like the burnt offering? Who thinks we should be like the grain offering? That's a good one. Who thinks we should be like the sin offering? Who thinks we should be like the trespass offering? Who thinks we should be like the fellowship offering? All right. So, I actually did record that. Justin's in the back recording. I'm just kidding. All right. So what I want to do is just go through a few of these offerings. We're going to pick out a few things, what differentiates each of the offerings from the other one. Okay, so the burnt offering, that's the first one listed. It's in Leviticus 6:2. And if you want to follow along with these, you can. I'm just going to be hitting all the offerings in order. Leviticus 6:2. It says, command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the Torah of the burnt offering. The burnt offering should remain on the hearth on the altar all night until the morning, while the fire of the altar is kept burning on it. So one of the things with the burnt offering is the priest is told to put on his linen garments and even his linen undergarments to make this offering on the altar. I'm assuming he puts on the undergarments first, because that would be weird if he didn't. But there's no command to eat any part of this burnt offering. It's all to be burnt in an ascension offering up to God. Then the priest takes off his clothes and he takes the ashes that result from the fat burning and he sets them beside the altar. Okay, and then he changes his clothes actually. And then he takes those ashes outside and he puts them in a clean place outside the camp. All right, we're going to move to the grain offering. This is the Torah of the grain offering. Aaron's sons are to offer it to Adonai in front of the altar. Now, I thought the grain offering was actually a pretty good candidate for the sacrifice that Rachel is talking about. What's special about it? So there's 3 ingredients in grain offering. You have your fine flour, you have your oil, and you have your frankincense. All right, with this one, the priest is going to reach in to the bowl of fine flour, and he's going to take, so the rabbi says that he takes from the part that has most concentrated with the oil, and he's going to put that onto the altar, and it's going to burn. The rest of the flour he can take, and then him and all the priests can make matzah from it. No leavened bread. They don't add any leaven, just matzah. So it has this potential in service of the temple and of the Kohanim to provide some sort of ministry to them. All right, let's go to the next one. Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the Torah of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered, the sin offering is to be slaughtered before Adonai. It is most holy. Okay, the sin offering, you'll see this, it mirrors the trespass offering, which is the next one, or the trespass guilt offering. It's the same thing if your version says guilt. But they mirror each other. All right, it's very, very holy. Okay, I'll just give you an example. It's so holy that if while you're slaughtering this offering, you get some of the blood on your clothes, you don't take your clothes anywhere into an unholy place. It has to be washed in a holy place. Another thing to note is that if you use, so they're also supposed to eat it, but if you use a clay pot to boil any of this meat from a sin offering, you have to break the clay pot. It is not to ever have any contact from any other unholy foods with this clay pot after it's been used for a sin or a trespass offering. If it's a bronze one, it must be scoured, cleansed by fire. All traces of this holy offering have to be completely clean. And then I'm just going to quickly cover the trespass offering. It says it is most holy in verse 7:7. This shows the likeness between these two. As the sin offering, so is the trespass offering. There is one Torah for them both. They are for the Cohen who makes atonement with them. It's because they're all supposed to eat it. The priest that offer this offering, some of this offering, most of it actually goes to them to eat the offering in a holy place. Now we're moving on to of the 5 that we're doing, this is the last one. It's the fellowship offering. Now this is the Torah of the sacrifice, the 7:11. This is the Torah of the sacrifice of the fellowship offerings, which may be offered to Adonai. Now, when Rav Shaul has this sacrifice in mind, I think, this is my personal opinion, and I'm going to explain why it is that to you. This is the one I think he has in mind. All right, first, there's one thing to know about this fellowship offering. There's 3 different types. All right, and the 3 different types of fellowship offering depends on why you're bringing it. All right, you have a Thanksgiving fellowship offering, you have a vow fellowship offering or covenant, and then you have the free will fellowship offering. Now the rules differ between these 3 different offerings, but mostly between the Thanksgiving offering and the other 2. Now, in all 3 of them, you're required to bring bread. You have to bring bread with the animal that you're offering as a sacrifice. There should be matzah spread with oil, there should be unleavened, and then there should also be leavened cakes with oil. So it's one of the fewer times that you have a leavened product being brought along with the sacrifice. Now, with the Thanksgiving offering, here's another difference. Here's actually one of the main differences. You have to eat it in the very first day. You have to eat it all the day that it's sacrificed. With the other 2, you have 2 days to eat it. Now, if you don't eat it in the first day, anything that's left over and goes to the second day is not acceptable as a sacrifice to God. Now, I was wondering why that is, and so I looked up some rabbinical commentary on this, and Rabbi Sforno has some good commentary on it, and I liked his explanation of this. I'm going to paraphrase his lengthy writing like this. If you received a miracle from God or a new birth or a miraculous salvation or healing, you should offer thanks to God in the form of this meal for the community. And as many people as you can come and get to witness your Thanksgiving, you should get them to come. As many as you can afford to get. So as big of an animal as you can get to show your thanks, you need to get that many people, if not more, to come and witness your Thanksgiving. Here's another rule. The person bringing the Thanksgiving offering, it says, by his own hand, he's to offer it before God. Now, the rabbis describe this, and parts of the offering go to God, parts of the offering go to the priest, and then the rest of it is for everyone that comes to partake in this Thanksgiving feast. All right, one of the priests is going to assist the offering bringer. He takes God's portion, which is the fat. He adds to it the priest portion, which is the breast of the animal, also known as the brisket, and he puts them into the hands of the Thanksgiving offerer to present as a wave offering. So let's read that verse. It's 7:29. It says, "Speak to Bnei Yisrael, children of Israel, saying, whoever brings the sacrifice of fellowship offerings to Adonai, to present his offering to Adonai, out of the sacrifice of his fellowship offerings, with his own hands, he is to bring it to Adonai's offering by fire. He is to present the fat with the breast, so that the breast may be waved for a wave offering before Adonai." So then they take the fat, which is God's portion, they place it on the altar, and the priests take their brisket. But the priest that assists the offerer in going up and waving this before God and going through this ritual the right way, he gets his own special portion. He gets the right shoulder of the animal. Now, it may seem as if we got away from the comparison that I was planning to do, but we haven't. I'm going to tie this in with some rich similarities between the purpose of this fellowship offering and how God calls us to conduct our lives. Okay, now remember in Romans 12, Paul says, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. So you present your bodies. So you, whenever he says this, you are both the sacrifice offerer and the sacrifice. All right? So God created a man for a purpose, right? This purpose is to praise God, to recognize him around us, and to show him thanks and gratitude, to invite people to join with us in that, and to point all people to God so that they see him through our works, our actions, our attitudes, and everything that we do, and the way that we raise our children, everything. And part of our service is to provide for the service of the ministry. Ministering back to God's anointed by giving them a brisket. So, and then this right shoulder portion, I was trying to make some connection to that. I think this right shoulder portion signifies this person, and there's I believe there's commentary. Joshua shared this with me. This is potentially showing that these ministers of God are the right hand of God on earth. All right, but why does God have these required sacrifices? Now, keep in mind that this fellowship offering, this is not a required sacrifice, which is interesting. It comes from a place within the heart. And for the Thanksgiving portion, it's a place of gratitude. From the vow offering, it's a place of devotion. And then the free will offering, it's a place of sacrifice out of love. So from some other scriptures that I read and that we're going to get into, I get the idea that God desires this voluntary sacrifice more than the required ones. And it has the same thing. There's a similarity between that and circumcision, right? God requires the circumcision of the flesh. But what does he really want? He wants the circumcision of the heart. And if you read the prophets and the Psalms, in some ways, they downplay the required sacrifices above the voluntary ones. All right? In some places, they say, yeah, you get, just paraphrasing kind of the general idea of it, it's like, sure, you sacrifice, but what God really wanted was something else. You could probably list a few of these things off. He wants obedience more than sacrifice, justice, mercy, true judgments. Like there's several times where he says, okay, you brought sacrifice, but you missed what God really wanted. So I'm going to let's go to Psalm 50. All right, and while you turn there, I want to say this, right? We covered the three types: the thanksgiving, the covenant, and then the free will. All right, now it's referenced several places in the Bible, but I think here you can see some of these parts coming out, the way God is speaking through David. All right, Psalm 50, and we'll start in verse 5. We'll go through 14. And as you read it, try to think about these different elements of this Thanksgiving offering. Psalm 55, gather my Kedoshim, my holy ones, to me, who cut a covenant with me through sacrifice. This is David speaking in the next verse. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Selah. Here's God again. Hear my people, and I will speak, O Israel, and I will testify against you. I am God, your God. I do not rebuke you for your sacrifices, for your burnt offerings are continually before me. I'm going to insert a but before this next verse, because I feel like it's implied there. But I have no need for a bull from your house, nor goats from your pens, for every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird of the mountains, and every moving thing in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine and all it contains. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer God a sacrifice of thank offerings, and then fulfill your vows to Elyon, or the Most High God. So he says, come, my holy ones who entered into covenant with me through a sacrifice. It's your vow offering. And then he says, when we sacrifice an animal, we're not giving him these physical things. They were already his. And then he says, bring God a thank offering and fulfill your vows to the Most High God. So I want to look at 9, verse 9, how it ties to 14. He has no need of a goat or a bull from your house nor goats for your pen. He doesn't need them because it's already his. He's very clear about that. But what he wants and what he needs is the only thing that he gave us control over. That's our heart. And he wants our heart to fulfill God's plan for the world, to show people God, to serve, to feed, to minister out of thanksgiving and appreciation and devotion and free will to God. Now, I'm not putting down any of the other sacrifices. They all have very deep, rich, prophetic meanings, deep purposes. And I don't fully understand all of them. But I'm learning and I'm every day more about what God intends for us to understand by these. But I want you to remember this. God wants a fellowship offering because he wants our heart. And he wants our lives to fulfill his purpose on earth because it's thankful to him. And it's devoted and it loves him purely out of free will. And I had a really meaningful time studying for this, and I connected with these sacrifices on a new level, especially this one that I think Paul is trying to get us to understand that we should resemble with purpose and function of our lives. And I hope that you can see that and feel my heart in this as well. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.